October 25, 1944. The Philippine Sea. USS Vanguard, DD 558. Fletcher-class destroyer. The coffee tasted like diesel fuel and burnt tin, but to gunner's mate first-class Jack Red O'Malley, it was the nectar of the gods. He stood on the steel grating of the fantail, leaning against the cold metal of Mount 53, his gun. It was a 5-inch/38 caliber single mount, a weapon he knew better than he knew his own wife back in Brooklyn. He knew its rhythm, its smell, and exactly how hard you had to kick the casing ejection chute when it jammed in high humidity. "Quiet morning, Chief," said Miller, a 19-year-old kid from Iowa with more freckles than brain cells. Miller was the hot shellman, the guy who caught the scalding brass casings as they flew out of the breach. "Too quiet, kid," Jack grunted, tossing the dregs of his coffee over the rail into the churning gray wake. "The Army is landing on Leyte. We're just the babysitters." The Vanguard was part of Taffy 3, a task unit of escort carriers and destroyers. Their job was boring. Patrol the coast, hunt submarines, and protect the slow, fat jeep carriers supporting the invasion. They were tin cans. Ships with skin so thin you could practically punch through it with a screwdriver. They weren't built for heavy combat. Jack adjusted his helmet. The humidity was already climbing. The sun was breaking over the horizon, painting the Pacific in deceptive shades of pink and orange. Then the ocean exploded. It wasn't a torpedo. It was a geyser of water, 200 feet high, erupting off the port bow. The sound arrived a second later, a tearing, screaming roar like a freight train falling from the sky. "Crump! What the hell was that?" Miller yelled, dropping his cigarette. Jack squinted at the horizon. He saw flashes, distant, ripple-like flashes on the edge of the world. Then he saw the masts. They weren't the familiar silhouettes of American ships. They were pagodas, towering, complex structures that looked like floating castles. Battle stations. The klaxon screamed, tearing through the morning calm. "General quarters. This is not a drill. All hands. Man your battle stations." Jack vaulted into the gun tub. "Get inside. Move, move, move." He strapped on his headset. The internal comm circuit was already buzzing with panic. "Bridge to all stations." The captain's voice came over the wire. Commander Evans didn't sound panicked. He sounded like he was ordering a ham sandwich. "Identified enemy fleet on the horizon. It's the center force. Battleships, cruisers, the whole damn Imperial Navy." Jack's blood ran cold. The center force. That meant the Yamato, the biggest battleship ever built. Its guns fired shells that weighed as much as a car. One hit from those guns wouldn't just sink a destroyer. It would vaporize it. "We are the only thing standing between them and the carriers," the captain continued. "We are going to attack." Miller looked at Jack, his face pale white. "Attack? Chief, we're a tin can. Those are battleships." Jack slapped a fresh magazine into the fuse setter. "You heard the man. Load the star shells. We need to blind them." The charge of the light brigade. The Vanguard surged. The deck vibrated violently as the engineers pushed the boilers to flank speed. Black smoke poured from the stacks, a chemical smokescreen designed to hide the carriers. But the Vanguard didn't hide. She turned out of the smoke. She turned directly toward the Japanese fleet. "Range!" Jack barked into his headset. 18,000 yards. The fire control director replied from the tower above. "Too far for our guns. We need to close to 10,000. "We're gonna be swimming in 5 minutes," muttered Kowalski, the loader. "Stow it!" Jack yelled. "Stand by!" The water around them began to boil. The Japanese had spotted the lone, insane American destroyer charging them. Sploosh, sploosh, sploosh. Columns of water dyed red, green, and yellow erupted on all sides. The Japanese used colored dye in their shells to spot their fall of shot. To Jack, it looked like a deadly rainbow. "They're bracketing us." Hard left rudder. The ship heeled over so sharply that Jack had to grab the traverse wheel to keep from falling. The Vanguard was dancing. The captain was chasing the splashes, steering the ship toward where the last shells had landed, gambling that the enemy gunners would correct their aim and miss the next volley. Range 14,000 yards. Open fire. Mount 53 roared. The 5-inch gun bucked, sliding back on its recoil springs. Boom! Clang! Hiss! Miller caught the hot brass with his asbestos gloves and threw it out the hatch. Kowalski slammed a new 55-pound shell into the tray. Jack hit the rammer lever. The breech block slammed shut. Boom! Rapid fire. Give me everything you got. Jack screamed. They were firing at a heavy cruiser, the Kumano. The cruiser was 10 times their size. It was like throwing rocks at a tank. But the rocks were hitting. Through the periscope, Jack saw sparks on the cruiser's superstructure. They were stripping away the bridge, the radar, the anti-aircraft guns. Keep hitting her. Aim for the waterline. The fish. Stand by torpedoes. This was the main event. A destroyer's guns were annoying, but its torpedoes were killers. The Vanguard carried 10 Mark 15 torpedoes. They had to get within 10,000 yards to use them. To get there, they had to run through a gauntlet of hellfire. A 14-inch shell from a battleship landed 50 yards off the starboard beam. The shockwave lifted the 2,000-ton destroyer out of the water. Jack smashed his face against the gun sight. Blood filled his mouth. Damage report. Hull integrity holding. Shrapnel in the galley. Range 9,000 yards. Fire torpedoes. Jack felt the whoosh 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 as the fish left the tubes. 10 deadly cylinders streaking through the water. Hard right. Get us back in the smoke. The Vanguard spun around, her engine screaming. She fled back toward the safety of the smoke screen she had laid. Jack watched the timer. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Boom! A massive underwater explosion rocked the horizon. A plume of water rose against the side of the Japanese cruiser. Hit! Confirmed hit on the cruiser. Her bow is blown off. A cheer went up in the gun mount. Miller was grinning like a maniac. We got M, Chief. We actually got M. Don't celebrate yet. Jack wiped the blood from his lip. We just kicked a hornet's nest. And now they're mad. The hammer falls. The Vanguard hid in the smoke for 10 minutes. It was a terrifying silence. They were blind. But so was the enemy. We can't stay here, the captain said over the comms. The carriers are still under fire. We have to draw their fire again.
Jesus, Kowalski whispered.
He wants to go back out there. We go where the captain takes us, Jack said, though his stomach churned. The Vanguard emerged from the smoke like a knife fighter stepping out of the shadows. But this time, the Japanese were waiting. They didn't bother with range-finding shots. They had the range. Jack saw the flash from the battleship Congo. Incoming. He didn't hear the shell. Physics didn't allow it. The shell was traveling faster than sound. The world simply disintegrated. The Vanguard was hit. Not by a small shell, but by a 14-inch armor-piercing round meant to sink aircraft carriers. It struck the aft engine room. The impact threw Jack against the back of the turret. The steel walls rang like a bell. The lights died instantly, replaced by the red glow of emergency battle lanterns. Miller, Kowalski, report.
I'm okay.
Miller coughed in the darkness. The ship shuddered. It wasn't the vibration of engines anymore. It was the death rattle of a wounded animal. The deck listed sharply to port. Bridge to all stations. The captain's voice was strained now. We have lost power to the aft engine. Speed reduced to 15 knots. Steering control is lost. We are shifting to manual steering aft. 15 knots. In a naval battle, that was standing still. They were a sitting duck. Look! Miller pointed out the vision slit. 3 Japanese destroyers were peeling off from the main formation. They were turning toward the crippled Vanguard. They were coming to finish the job. They're coming to execute us, Jack said grimly. He checked the ready service ammunition locker. They had 40 shells left. Manual control, Jack yelled. The hydraulics are dead. We have to crank it by hand. He grabbed the heavy brass wheel that controlled the elevation. Felt like trying to lift a truck. Target the lead destroyer. Range 6,000 yards. The Vanguard was bleeding oil and steam. She was burning amidships. Her speed was dropping. She was broken. But her guns were still pointing at the enemy. "Load!" Jack roared, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "Load the damn gun! We ain't done yet." The Japanese destroyers opened fire. The water around the Vanguard turned into a froth of explosions. Shrapnel pinged off the gun shield like hail. Jack looked through the sight. The enemy destroyer was getting bigger. He could see the sailors on her deck. "Fire!" Mount 53 barked. The battle had just begun. And Jack O'Malley knew with a sinking certainty that he wasn't going home. The Philippine Sea. 7:45 hours. 2 degrees right. "Crank it! Crank it, you son of a bitch!" Jack O'Malley was screaming so loud his throat tasted like blood. The hydraulic motors that usually spun the 20-ton gun mount were dead. Now it was just muscle and gears. Kowalski and Miller were hanging off the manual traverse wheels, their faces purple with exertion, veins popping in their necks. They were trying to track a Japanese destroyer moving at 30 knots while their own deck pitched and rolled like a drunk in a hurricane. "It's too heavy, Chief," Kowalski gasped, sweat stinging his eyes. "It ain't heavy," Jack lied. "It's just stubborn." Heaving. "Now!" They synchronized their push. The barrel of Mount 53 groaned and shifted a fraction of an inch to the right. Through the telescopic sight, Jack saw the enemy destroyer. It was an Asashio class, sleek and deadly. It was less than 4,000 yards away, point-blank range for naval guns. It was pouring 5-inch fire into the Vanguard. Crash. A shell slammed into the Vanguard's superstructure, just below the bridge. The explosion showered the fantail with burning debris. "Fire!" Jack pulled the manual firing lever. Boom! The recoil slammed the gun back. The empty brass casing flew out, bouncing off Miller's chest. He didn't flinch. He grabbed the next 55-pound shell and shoved it into the breach. "Short!" Jack yelled, seeing the splash in the water. "Up 200. Crank elevation." The duel. It was a barroom brawl. No tactics, no radar, no computers. Just 2 ships circling each other, trading punches until one fell down. The Vanguard was losing. She was on fire from bow to stern. Her main mast had collapsed, draping rigging and cables over the midsection. The No. 2 funnel was gone, blown clean off. But the Japanese destroyer made a mistake. It turned broadside to unleash a torpedo spread. In doing so, it exposed its full profile. "I got you," Jack whispered. "I got you right where I want you." He didn't wait for the elevation crew. He compensated by aiming slightly high. "Fire!" Boom! The shell arc was perfect. It slammed directly into the Japanese destroyer's torpedo tubes just as they were preparing to launch. The explosion was catastrophic. The Japanese torpedoes, the infamous long-lance oxygen torpedoes, were highly volatile. The enemy ship's midsection erupted in a blinding white fireball. The blast broke the enemy destroyer's back instantly. "Yes!" Miller screamed, pumping his fist. "Did you see that? We blew him to hell." "Reload!" Jack barked, cutting through the celebration. "There's 2 more out there." The silence from above. "Bridge, this is Mount 53. Jack keyed his headset. "Target destroyed. Requesting new sector assignment." "Bridge." "Static." "Bridge acknowledge." Nothing but the hiss of the dead wire. Jack looked forward, past the smokestack. The bridge wasn't there. Where the command center of the USS Vanguard had stood 5 minutes ago, there was now a twisted mangle of burning steel. A direct hit from a battleship shell had sheared the top of the superstructure off. The captain was dead. The executive officer was dead. The helm was gone. The Vanguard was headless. She began to turn in a slow, lazy circle to port. She was drifting. "Chief," Miller asked, his voice trembling. "Who's steering the ship?" "Nobody," Jack said, his voice grim. "We're drifting. We're on our own." The executioners. The remaining Japanese ships saw the American destroyer go limp. They stopped maneuvering. They closed in for the kill like wolves surrounding a wounded elk. A heavy cruiser, the Chikuma, moved in off the port quarter. Its massive 8-inch guns slowly rotated toward the vanguard. "They're gonna finish us," Kowalski said. He stopped cranking. He looked at the massive cruiser. "What's the point, Chief? We're dead." Jack grabbed Kowalski by his collar and slammed him against the ammo locker. "The point is we're still breathing. The point is every shell we fire is one less they fire at the baby carriers. Pick up that wheel or I will throw you over the side myself." Kowalski looked at Jack's eyes. They were burning with a terrifying resolve. He picked up the wheel. "Load armor-piercing," Jack ordered. "We're gonna punch some holes in that cruiser." The snap. They never got the shot off. The cruiser didn't fire its guns. It had fired torpedoes minutes ago, while the vanguard was distracted. Jack saw the wake first. A straight, white line racing across the surface of the water, aimed directly at amidships. Brace for impact. It wasn't a thud. It was a seismic event. The torpedo struck the vanguard exactly in the boiler room, the structural weak point of the ship. The explosion lifted the entire 2,500-ton vessel out of the water. Jack was thrown into the air. He hit the roof of the gun shield and fell onto the steel deck. The world went black for a second. When he opened his eyes, he was deaf. A high-pitched ringing filled his skull. He pulled himself up. "Miller? Kowalski?" Miller was groaning, holding a broken arm. Kowalski was unconscious, bleeding from a cut on his head. Jack looked forward. What he saw defied comprehension. The vanguard was gone. Or rather, half of it was. The ship had snapped in two. The bow section, with the forward guns and the wreckage of the bridge, had broken away. It was already rolling over, sinking rapidly beneath the waves. Jack watched in horror as the number 53 painted on the hull disappeared under the gray water. But the stern, the back half of the ship where Jack stood, was still afloat. It was bobbing violently, unconnected to anything. The severed edge of the deck was a jagged nightmare of twisted metal and hissing steam, open to the ocean. The island of steel. The stern section settled. It was listing heavily to starboard, maybe 20 degrees. Water was washing over the deck on the low side. Jack shook his head, trying to clear the ringing. They were sinking. It was a matter of minutes. "Abandon ship!" Someone yelled from the damage control party below decks. Men were scrambling up the ladders, jumping into the oil-slicked water. "Miller, get up!" Jack grabbed the kid. "We gotta go!" Miller stumbled to the rail. "My arm. I can't swim." "You'll float. Put your vest on." Jack looked out at the ocean. The Japanese cruiser Chikuma was slowing down. It was coming closer, barely 1,000 yards away. His crew lined the rails, watching the American ship die. They weren't firing anymore. Why waste ammo on a sinking wreck? Jack stared at them. He saw an officer on the wing of the cruiser's bridge, looking through binoculars. Rage, pure and white-hot, flooded Jack's chest. "They think we're done. They think we're just garbage to be looked at." Jack looked back at Mount 53. The gun was twisted. The shield was dented. The deck under it was slanted at a crazy angle. But the barrel was intact. And the ready service locker was open. He saw the brass base of a shell glinting in the sun. "Chief?" Miller asked, standing at the rail. "Coming?" Jack O'Malley let go of the rail. He turned back toward the gun. "No," Jack said. "Chief, she's going down. The water is already at the main deck." "I know," Jack said. He climbed back into the gun tub. The water was sloshing around his ankles inside the mount. "But I ain't done talking yet." The last stand. Jack sat in the pointer's seat. It was wet and slippery. The electrical firing system was dead. The hydraulics were dead. The communications were dead. He was sitting on a sinking island of steel.
Fascigne à 13,000 ton cruiser.
"Kowalski!" Jack yelled. "Wake up!" Kowalski stirred on the deck. He looked around, dazed. He saw the water. He saw Jack in the seat. "Chief, are you crazy? We got 1 minute of air left in this compartment." Jack screamed. "And I got 5 shells in the rack. Load the gun." Kowalski looked at the sinking ship. Then he looked at the Japanese cruiser looming over them. A strange, Fatalistic calm came over him. He stood up. He wiped the blood from his eyes. He grabbed a 55-pound shell. "Aye, aye, Chief." He slammed the shell into the tray. He punched the rammer with his fist because the motor was dead. He shoved the breech block closed with his shoulder. Clank. Jack put his eye to the telescope. The angle was bad because of the listing deck. He had to aim the gun almost into the sky to compensate for the slope of the sinking ship. He lined up the crosshairs on the cruiser's bridge. "Hey, Tojo." Jack gritted his teeth. "You forgot one." He pulled the manual firing lever. Boom! The gun roared. The recoil shook the sinking stern violently. The empty casing flew out and splashed into the rising water on the deck. On the Japanese cruiser, the officers on the bridge ducked as a shell screamed over their heads, shearing off the radio mast. They looked down in shock. The broken half of the American destroyer was shooting back. The Fury. "Reload!" Jack screamed. The Japanese cruiser woke up. It realized the corpse was still fighting. Its secondary turrets began to turn toward the tiny, sinking target. "Come on! Come on!" Kowalski loaded the second shell. Boom! Direct hit. The shell smashed into the cruiser's secondary gun mount, igniting a small fire. Water was now pouring into the gun tub. It was up to Jack's waist. "Reload! I can't reach the rack. It's underwater," Kowalski yelled. Miller, the kid with the broken arm, suddenly appeared back in the tub. He hadn't jumped. He dove underwater, grabbed a shell, and surfaced, gasping. "Here!" Miller shoved the shell into the loader's hands. "Good lad," Jack yelled. The water was rising fast. The stern was tilting vertically. The gun barrel was pointing up at a sharper and sharper angle. Jack wasn't aiming anymore. He was just pointing the gun at the gray shape that filled his vision. He saw the flashes from the cruiser's guns. Incoming. Hold on. Water sprayed over them as shells bracketed their position. Shrapnel tore through the thin gun shield. Jack felt a hot sting in his shoulder, but he didn't check it. He slammed the breech closed himself this time. The water was at his chest. Fire! Boom! The third shell flew. The stern gave a lurch. A massive groan of escaping air bubbled up from below. The ocean was claiming them. "She's going under," Miller screamed. "One more," Jack roared, the water lapping at his chin. "Give me one more." He wasn't fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for defiance. He was fighting to show them that you could break the ship, you could break the spine, but you couldn't break the crew. He looked through the sight one last time. All he saw was gray steel and smoke. He pulled the lever. Click. Misfire. The gun didn't fire. The water had flooded the firing mechanism. Jack slammed his fist against the breech. Damn it! The stern pitched forward. The gun tub dipped below the surface. "Abandon ship!" Jack yelled, grabbing Miller by his life vest. "Swim! Swim for your lives!" They pushed off the gun mount just as the suction began to take hold. Jack kicked his legs, fighting the swirling vortex of the sinking ship. He broke the surface, gasping for air. He spun around in the water. The stern of the Vanguard was vertical now. For a moment, it hung there, like a tombstone marking its own grave. The propeller was high in the air, still slowly turning. And there, half-submerged, was Mount 53. The barrel was pointing straight up at the sky, defiant to the end. With a final gurgle, the ship slipped beneath the waves. Jack treaded water in the oil-slicked sea. He was bleeding. His ship was gone. The sharks were coming. But he was alive. And the Japanese cruiser was burning. October 25, 1944. 9 o'clock hours. The Philippine Sea. The silence was heavier than the noise. 10 minutes ago, the world had been a cacophony of exploding shells, screaming steam, and tearing metal. Now, there was only the slap of water against debris and the ragged breathing of dying men. Jack O'Malley floated in a thick slurry of bunker sea fuel oil. Coated everything. It was in his eyes, stinging like acid. It was in his nose, choking him. It coated the surface of the ocean like a black shroud, smoothing out the waves. He held onto a cork life net that had floated free from the wreckage. Beside him, Miller was clinging to the rope loops, his face a mask of black oil and white shock. "Is she gone?" Miller whispered, spitting out black bile. "Is the Vanguard gone?" Jack wiped his eyes with a greasy forearm. He looked around. There was nothing. No estern. No bow. Just a debris field of crates, life jackets, and body parts. The Vanguard had plunged 20,000 feet down to the bottom of the Philippine Trench. "She's gone, kid," Jack rasped. "She's gone." The salute. A shadow fell over them. Jack froze. He looked up. A massive gray wall was gliding past them, cutting through the water less than 50 yards away. It was the Japanese destroyer. The one they had been fighting. The one whose torpedo tubes Jack had blown up. It was limping, trailing smoke, but it was still floating. "Don't move," Jack hissed to the group of 5 survivors clinging to the net. "Don't breathe. If they see us, they'll machine gun us in the water." The enemy ship loomed over them. Jack could see the Japanese sailors lining the rail. They were looking down at the oil-slicked Americans. Jack's hand drifted to the knife on his belt. It was a useless gesture, a knife against a destroyer, but he gripped it anyway. "Come on then. Finish it." But the machine guns remained silent. Instead, an officer on the wing of the bridge, a man in a white uniform, bandaged around the head, stepped forward. He looked down at the spot where the Vanguard had gone under. He raised his hand to his cap. He saluted. The Japanese sailors along the rail followed suit. They stood at attention, saluting the empty ocean. It lasted 5 seconds. Then the destroyer accelerated, its screws churning the water, moving off to rejoin the retreating fleet. "Did you see that?" Miller asked, his voice trembling. "They saluted us. They saluted the ship," Jack said, watching the enemy fade into the mist. "They know a warrior when they see one, even if he's an enemy." The sun. By noon, the adrenaline was gone. In its place came the torture. The tropical sun hammered down on them. The oil amplified the heat, frying their skin. The salt water dehydrated them, drawing moisture out through their pores. There were about 50 men in their group, drifting in a loose cluster. Some had rafts. Most just had life vests. "Water!" A man named Henderson moaned. He was burned bad. "I need water." "Don't drink the ocean," Jack barked. His voice was the only thing holding them together. "You drink that salt, you go crazy. You go crazy, you die. Keep your mouth shut." Jack checked on Miller. The kid's arm was swelling up, tight against the sleeve of his wet dungarees. "How you holding up, Miller?" "It hurts, Chief. It throbs." "Pain tells you you're alive," Jack said. "Focus on it. Don't fall asleep." Jack looked at the horizon. Empty. The American fleet had retreated to protect the carriers. They were alone in 30,000 square miles of ocean. And they were bleeding. The sharks. It started at sunset. The water turned from blue to a deep, ominous purple. Something touched my leg. A sailor on the edge of the group whispered. "Driftwood," Jack said quickly. "Just debris." "No," the man said, his eyes wide white discs in the oil-stained face. "It was rough, like sandpaper." Jack felt a cold knot in his stomach. He knew these waters. Oceanic whitetips, tigers. They were drawn by the blood and the explosions. Splash. 20 yards away, a man screamed. It was a short, sharp sound, cut off abruptly as he was yanked under. The water churned. A tail fin, gray and jagged, broke the surface and slapped the water. Sharks. Panic is more dangerous than explosives. The men started thrashing, kicking, trying to climb on top of each other to get out of the water. "Stop moving," Jack roared. "Stop thrashing. You're acting like bait." He grabbed Miller and pulled him into the center of the circle. "Get the wounded in the middle," Jack ordered. "Form a ring. Face outward. Kick them in the nose if they get close." It was a night of horror. They couldn't see them. They could only hear the splashes, the sudden gasps, and the tearing sounds. Every shadow in the water was a monster. A shark bumped the cork net. felt like a car hitting a bumper. The rough skin rasped against Jack's boot. He kicked out, aiming for where he thought the snout was. His boot connected with solid muscle. The shark thrashed and swam away. "Chief," Miller whispered, "I don't want to get eaten. I don't want to die like that." Jack pulled the kid closer. He pulled his knife out. "You won't," Jack promised. "If they come for us, I'll kill him, or I'll kill us. But you won't be eaten alive." They floated in the dark, surrounded by the predators, waiting for a dawn that felt like it would never come. The hallucination. Day 3. Thirst was no longer a sensation. It was a madness. Jack's tongue was swollen to twice its size. His lips were cracked and bleeding. He started to see things. He saw his wife, Mary, walking on the water. She was carrying a tray of iced tea. The glass was sweating with condensation. "Come and get it, Jack," she smiled. He reached out. His hands splashed into the warm, salty slime. "Chief," Miller was slurring his words. "Do you hear the gun?" Jack shook his head. "No gun." "Mount 53, Miller mumbled. "It's shooting. I can hear the casing hitting the deck. Clang, clang." Jack listened. He heard it too. A rhythmic clanging sound. Clang, clang. He closed his eyes.
I'm dying.
"My brain is cooking." Clang, clang. It was getting louder. Jack opened his eyes. He forced his head up. It wasn't a hallucination. A ship. A small gray ship. An LCI, landing craft infantry. It was moving slowly through the debris field. A sailor on the bow was banging a boat hook against the metal hull to attract attention. "Miller," Jack croaked. He slapped the kid's face. "Miller, look. Is it the Japs?" Miller whispered. Jack squinted. He saw the flag, the stars and stripes. Tears, hot and stinging, welled up in Jack's eyes. He tried to shout, but only a dry rasp came out. He waved his arms. He splashed the water. "Here. Over here." The boat turned toward them. The rescue. Strong hands grabbed Jack's vest. He was hauled up over the gunwale. His legs gave way instantly. He collapsed onto the hot steel deck of the landing craft. Someone put a canteen to his lips. "Slowly, mate. Slowly." The water was warm and tasted of metal. It was the best thing Jack had ever tasted. He pushed the canteen away. "Miller," Jack gasped. "Get the kid." He watched as they hauled Miller up. The kid was unconscious, but breathing. Jack looked back at the water. The ocean was calm now. The sharks were gone. The oil slick was dispersing. A sailor with a clipboard knelt beside him. "Name? Ship?" "O'Malley," Jack whispered. "USS Vanguard." The sailor paused. He looked at the other rescuer. "The Vanguard?" the sailor asked. "Buddy, we heard you guys took on the whole center force alone. We didn't seem to have much choice," Jack muttered. He tried to sit up. He looked at the spot where his ship had died. "Did we stop them?" Jack asked. "The battleships. Did they get to the carriers?" The sailor smiled.
No.
"They turned back. You guys hurt them bad enough that they got spooked. They thought they were fighting cruisers, not destroyers. You bluffed the whole damn Japanese Navy." Jack lay back on the deck. He closed his eyes. They had won. The ship was gone, half the crew was dead. But they had won. Epilogue: The Ghost Gun. November 11th, 1994. San Diego Naval Base. 50 years later. Jack O'Malley stood at the podium. He was 75 years old now. His hair was white, and he walked with a cane, but his grip on the lectern was iron hard. The crowd was silent. Officers in dress whites, young sailors, and a few old men in wheelchairs. They were commissioning a new destroyer. The USS Vanguard, DDG-105. Jack looked at the sleek new ship. It had missiles, radar, computers. It didn't look anything like his old tin can. "They asked me about that day." Jack spoke into the microphone. His voice was gravelly, worn by time and smoke. "They asked me why we fired." He looked at the front row. There, sitting in a wheelchair, was Miller. The old man nodded at him, his left arm still scarred from the break that never healed quite right. "The ship was broken," Jack said. The captain was dead. The engines were gone. We were sinking. Jack paused. He could still smell the oil. He could still feel the water rising to his chest. But a ship isn't dead until the crew gives up, Jack said. We fired because it was the only thing left to do. We fired because as long as that gun was barking, we weren't victims. We were warriors. He touched the ribbon on his chest. The Navy Cross. People say we were heroes. I say we were just angry. Angry that they broke our ship. So we decided to break a few of theirs before we left. Jack leaned forward. This new ship, she's got a lot of technology. But technology don't win fights. Spirit wins fights. If you ever find yourself broken, sinking, and outnumbered, just remember Mount 53. Remember that you can fight even when the water is up to your neck. Jack stepped back. He saluted the new ship. God bless the Vanguard, and keep her guns dry. As the band played Anchors Aweigh, Jack looked out past the harbor, toward the infinite Pacific horizon. For a brief moment he saw it. He saw the stern of a shattered destroyer, bobbing in the gray waves. He saw the gun pointing at the sky, and he heard the roar of the last shot, echoing forever across the water. The end.